ICQ Podcast episode 391, Kickstart Ham Radio for 2023. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 391st episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supporting this episode by our monthly annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Dan, KB6 November Uniform, Caryn, KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a look at how we can kickstart our hobby in 2023. As always, we'd like to thank our very kind annual and monthly subscription donors for continuing to help us pay our way and our bills, etc. on the internet, our hosting costs across the board, and allow us obviously to fund into projects like the digital group and the ICQ podcast website. If you'd like to help out with those running costs, we ask for a very, very simple logic. It's called the value for value model. We ask you to think about the value you found from the show today, turn it into a monetary figure, and then go to icqpodcast.com/donate. I say to send that our way and say everything we receive goes back into the show. Right, well, now we're going to join Martin, Dan, Caryn and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including Ham's induction into Engineering Academy and a big promise from an ultra tiny battery. As always, hope you enjoy.
So hi guys, and welcome to episode 391 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello there, Martin. Nice to be here again.
Yeah, great to have you, mate. And as I say, I think this one could be a lively one.
They're all lively.
Yeah, they are, which is good. Staying your side of the pond, we have Caryn Eve Murray, KD2GUT. And I got your call sign right, Caryn.
Yes, and it's good to be back, Martin.
Yeah, good to chat with you, Caryn. And moving to Germany, we have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Oh, Martin, you spoiled it all for me. I was going to jump on you trying to make Caryn into a person from the Isle of Man with your usual call sign for her. But good evening, everybody.
Yeah, evening, Ed. And for some reason, Edmund Spicer has locked himself away somewhere and forgotten that it's a podcast record night tonight. So there's not so many as normal, but I'm sure we're gonna have fun anyway, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the podcast news roundtable. First news roundtable, Ed, I'm going to get you to go first on this, but Dr. Rose, massive number of call signs here he's got, has just been added to the Indian National Academy of Engineering. Do you want to go first, Ed?
Yeah, Dr. Ulrich Rohde, he's got a US call of N1UL, which most people know him under. However, he's actually a Munich lad. He was born in Munich or around Munich and holds two German call signs as well. A very, very well read and written and intelligent gentleman. And if you look at his QRZ page or anywhere on the internet, you'll see a long line of qualifications. And this latest honour is actually from the Indian National Academy of Engineering, who will induct Dr. Ulrich Rohde as a fellow during ceremonies in mid-December. He's actually only the third foreign fellow elected by the INAE, and prior to him was Dr. Jeffrey Wineland, who was a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and also Dr. Philip H. Knight. So this is a major recognition of all the good work that both in technology, and also he also gives a lot to charities as well. But he is really well known in the area of the early days of software-defined radios. He has been around a while. He's been licensed since 1956, so he's in his elderly years, shall we say, but he's a real gentleman as well, I've heard him speaking a couple of times. Well done, Dr. Rohde. And yeah, well done on the Indian National Academy of Engineering for inducting him into organisation. And we were talking about this before this started, and I'll say quite honestly, it would not surprise me if Dr. Rohde at some point got a Nobel Prize for his work in electronics and engineering. He's that level of person and really a star radio amateur as well. If anybody's ever worked him maritime mobile from his yacht, he is really into amateur radio and really also as much a scientist as a technician, I would probably say. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, as I say, I know we use equipment made by his company at work, and lots of people obviously use that sort of equipment. But very interesting guy, isn't he, Caryn?
That he is. It's one thing to be adept in the sciences and to be adept in technology and to advance both the radio art and so many other related things, but then to look out for people. Too many people think, scientists are really into the tech side of things and don't look beyond that. We have quite a few, of course, in the amateur radio ranks who are so generous with what they've gained over the years. So he is one of those, and he is to be commended for that. Funny thing, when I first learned of his election to be a fellow, I looked on his QRZ page, and Ed, you're right. That's one of the few things he does not have on there is the Nobel Prize. But nice thing about the QRZ page is it can be updated. So I say stay tuned.
Yeah, it'd be nice if he did get a Nobel Prize for all the work he has done, in fairness. Dan, have we left you much to say about this one?
Oh, for sure. So I would rate Ulrich Rohde as it being in the class of Hewlett and Packard, our hometown boys here. And, I would think that you could make a pretty good parallel between the two. Here are a couple of guys who are really engineers, and they formed successful businesses. That don't overlook that. It's one thing to be a great engineer, another thing to be able to build a business like Rohde and Schwartz. And of course, he didn't do it Rohde and Schwartz by himself, but neither did Hewlett and Packard. And as far as the Nobel Prize thing goes, I suppose it'd be nice, but unfortunately, and this is the way they're set up, engineers don't get Nobel Prizes, and so I wouldn't hold my breath on Ulrich Rohde getting a Nobel Prize.
But it would be nice if he did. And as I say, he has been recognised many times in other ways. And yeah, we all know his name in this hobby by his quality equipment he's made. So a great story there. Move to our next news story. And it's kind of an announcement, but it's YOTA Month. December is YOTA Month, and the RSGB will be using GB2 to YOTA, and it's getting the youth on the air and making contacts. And if you hear one of these special stations, get involved with them. But Caryn, you also tell me it's happening your side of the pond as well, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, there are several stations on this side of the pond. In all, according to the website, there are now 43 participating stations. And in the United States and in Canada, there are stations as well. So folks can listen for K8A, K8O, K8T, K8Y. Those are the YOTA Youth on the Air. They will be the Youth on the Air stations. And of course, Canada will have some stations as well. So North America is in the game and ready. But it's really nice to see the lineup. Sweden, Russia, Poland, Egypt. This really is a nice global gathering. And you've got a whole month Amateur radio lights up the bands in December anyway, with lots of holiday and special event stations. So it's good. If you miss the first week, you can jump in the second week. Good to hear young voices. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you're dead right. It's good to hear young voices on, and as I say, it's something else to work. For those of you who love working at special event stations, and I know our Edmund does, this is going to be a good one. There's a lot of stations around for you to work. What do you think, Dan? Plenty of Morse coming?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I hope I can hear some of them on the Morse code portions of the bands. But yeah, I just did a story for our in the ARDC website on the YOTA camp this summer, and all these people that cry that there's no kids in radio should read the story and then get on the air here and work these folks, because they are the future of the hobby, and we should encourage them as much as we can.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And equally, and I'm not saying they're bad operators, because they aren't. They are good operators. But I think, if we come across somebody who's not operating maybe correctly, they're doing their best, they need a bit of help in operating, they're a little bit shy, cut them a bit of slack. Special event stations, you're unlikely to get that. But for other youth or new people coming in the hobby, cut them a bit of slack so that they learn rather than put them off the hobby. I've heard so many people go back to newly licensed people and be over the top nasty. So
absolutely,
yeah. So YOTA Month is good. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just looking through the actual list of all the countries that are taking part with special event stations. And for those interested, that's listed at events.ham-yota.com. And yeah, you got lots of countries around Europe, but there's some others in there as well. You mentioned Egypt, Turkey, and one that I found quite interesting. There's actually a station on from Namibia in Africa. So it's not just the first world countries, shall we say. There's El Salvador in the South America as well, or is that Central America? It's Central America, isn't it? Republic of Korea. So this really is a worldwide action. I see Japan's on from Region 3, but that seems to be the only ones from Region 3, unfortunately. But a lot of stations on from Region 1 and Region 2. So that's all very good news. And yeah, I'll just echo what the others have said. Please, give them a bit of slack. Let them enjoy the hobby. Let them promote the hobby, and let's just see how well they do, and remember a bit of Christmas spirit, and wish them well, and wait your turn in the pile-ups for them, and I'm sure you'll be very happy with the contact with them. Good luck not only to the teams, but also the people that are helping in the background, perhaps supplying the stations for the youngest of the people. But these are people actually up to 25 years old. So in a lot of cases, they are running the complete station themselves. So that's really good. And yeah, they're also running a contest alongside it, and there's awards and everything else. Check on the web, you'll find it. YOTA is either Youngsters on the Air if you're in Region 1, or it's Youngsters on the Air if you're in Region 2, or Youth on the Air if you're in Region 1, or which way around is it? I forget, but it's YOTA in any case. Back to you, Martin.
Yes, certainly is. And I know that one term is not seen particularly well in one of the regions, but that's, hey, we're all amateurs, and there's not a derogative term. It's not meant if somebody gets it wrong. Right, I'm going to get you to go again, Ed, on the next news story, but there's a big promise from an ultra tiny battery. Battery technology is ramping ahead over the last few years, isn't it?
Yeah, and it seems to be getting faster, if you like, the new things that are coming along. This particular story is about an extremely small battery that doesn't produce that much power. We're talking between 0.1 milliamp hour and 0.5 milliamp hour in the current version. But the thing's so small, it can be mistaken for an SMD chip. It really is that small. And big thing is that it doesn't need charging that often and will last a long time between charges. So it's meant for small devices like perhaps Bluetooth connected devices to keep the Bluetooth running on low power. Yeah, so interesting, fast charging. But the one thing I'll raise on this is, like with all batteries, whether they be lithium batteries that are in cars or in all the electronics we have these days, where's the plan with what to do with them when they actually do wear out and can't be recharged? That is an awful lot of chemical waste that somebody is going to have to take care of. So if you thought getting rid of nuclear waste is a problem, the quantity of the batteries, including this new ultra tiny battery, is going to be a lot bigger problem in 20 years' time or even sooner. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, interesting point you raised there, Ed, but phenomenal battery technology, that little battery. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, you know what is interesting to me is the level of advancement we're seeing now with batteries. And, it's almost as if, when the need comes up, the investment goes in and we find technical solutions to these problems. So, Ed mentioned, what do you do when about disposing of these things? Well, I think when it gets to a certain point, somebody's going to step in and say, yeah, we'll figure out how to do that. And they will, so.
I wish I had your confidence, Dan. I wish I had your confidence.
No. So the question is going to be the timing, right? Are we going to be able to do that before we basically get into such a bad situation we can't get out of it? That kind of thing.
Yep.
But really, almost seems to me that every time we, like batteries this size would have been unheard of 20 years ago, right? Maybe even 10 years ago.
Even 5 years ago.
And yet now we have them. And even, just all electronics, period. Because what makes these batteries useful now? The fact that electronics doesn't require as much power as it used to. So, all these things are, it's just amazing to me from an engineering point of view. And I have an engineering degree, so it's like, just like amazing to me. That's my comment on it anyway.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, Dan. And, as somebody who's lugged sealed lead acid batteries and leisure batteries around, which are, I had a 120 amp hour leisure battery. Oh, that used to nearly cripple me getting it from the backyard shed to the front and onto the car. That's weighed a ton. So good that it's getting lighter and better and longer and all those things. Caryn, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Just a little bit, and that's fine. The promise of this is truly a double-edged sword, in my opinion. I love that the technology is able to do this at a micro level, and not knowing the intricacies of it, I still think perhaps science being what it is, perhaps this can be at some point adapted to a macro level, and there will be greater power that can be handled. So I think if you can model something small and adapt it to something big, that's good precedent. The other side of the sword, however, is what Ed had touched on. We are really becoming increasingly wasteful. I must tell you, every time I write a story or see a story about satellites, for instance, I say to myself, how much are we going to be putting up there? How much are we going to be putting out there? And what are we going to do with all this junk? And ultimately, batteries are not infinitely renewable and rechargeable. So yeah, I worry about that as well. I still think it's an achievement for these little batteries, but I think we need to keep an eye on responsibility to the environment at some point sooner rather than later. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you're dead right. And over the years, we've got very wasteful with resources and chemicals and one thing and another. And I remember the manufacturing process is now not certainly in the UK and probably most parts of the world, not allowed to use lead solder, lead tin solder. It has to be lead free. And yeah, it's the right thing to do. It's a bitch to solder with, the lead free stuff, but it's it's the right thing to do. We have to do the right.
But using that example, Martin, that's exactly where technology coming along and finding a solution didn't work, because what they produced was a less usable product and more costs in doing it. And really, I suspect we're, near enough is not good enough when it comes to the environment.
Yeah, well, it's used, and I have to use it now because I work in manufacturing. I still have lead solder at home, though. You're still allowed to use it, but not just in production. So the leaded solder does flow that much nicer, but they were worried about landfill and stuff going into landfill with all the lead and one thing and another. So do understand why. Right, let's have a look at the next one. Santa's HF net is coming to town. Well, I like this one because it's a feel-good, fun one. And Caryn, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Okay, thank you. And I want to say who doesn't love Santa, except I guess perhaps Mrs. Santa on a bad day. We love having this kind of event. There are Santa nets that are done locally. There are Santa nets that are done globally. This one, I guess, as far as HF can go on any given night, Santa can be reached by anybody, and a licensed operator and a child. You can even check in beforehand. So I don't think there are going to be many pileups. I mean, the old thing of waiting online at the department store to sit on Santa's lap. This is so much better. This is the magic of radio. You'll notice too, Ed was able to add something really nice about the fact that Santa, a different organization. This is a Colorado hams, as opposed to the 3916 net, which is a different group of hams. But for Echolink and repeaters in Colorado, they have Santa on VHF. And you can check in there, and this certainly allows people around the world, maybe who are not able to get in through HF, to talk to a different Santa. They have that as well. On a personal note, you guys know I miss old Father 9 Christmas, OF9X, out of Finland. I listen every year to hear if there's going to be news of that. But this is certainly a nice substitute for other people who, like me, just enjoy adding the magic of radio to the magic of the season. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we have to do something. And as you say, there's a lot that's going to happen over Christmas, I'm sure. Dan, you going to get involved with this or work any of the stations?
Ho, ho, ho. I often thought we should try that here in Ann Arbor on our repeater, but I don't know. I never got enough. Never got around to really organizing it. But no, these are always fun. It's always fun to do stuff like this. We talk about special events. This is kind of a special event thing, and yeah, I mean that's my comment. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, just as a side, going off really at a tangent. My eldest grandson Colin's eldest boy, is at university in Finland at the moment. And they were having trouble finding out where he was the other day. Turns out he was up in Lapland doing sledge riding with huskies and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know if he was hoping to go and see Father Christmas or not, but there you go.
Looking for some red-nosed reindeer?
He might well have been, yeah. Ed, you were saying that this doesn't really happen in Europe, does it?
As in the nets and things. So the only one that we know of was the one in Finland, but it doesn't seem to be happening this year, unfortunately. And I'm rather surprised, actually, because, I mean, the idea is good. And I was actually also surprised. I mean, I've heard about the Santa HF net or the 80-metre net the last few years. And I thought it's been going maybe 3 or 4 years. It's been going 17 years. So I think I remember the first one being announced. So, oh, God, time's going past too quick. But, yeah, great idea. Well done. And if it's on Echolink through one of the groups and on their local VHF repeat, it's on 80 metre on the other. The 80 metre one, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but obviously, is at a US time. So it really is a US and Canada serving special event, because the times that you'd need to be on in Europe to get into that net when the propagation was right would be like the middle of the night for the people in the US. So unfortunately, it's not international, which is why it would have been nice if the Finland one had been on, but it isn't. And that's life. We'll have to do without Santa this year, at least from a radio point of view. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I know what you mean about strange hours and days, one thing and another, and trying to make schedules with people. Our Phil, VK6ADF, down there in Western Australia, and he'll quite often come up on the talk group, the digital talk group, and I'll forget what the time is where he is. And then I'll suddenly realise and say, Phil, you need to go to bed. You've got to go to work tomorrow. And he's up half the night. Great guys, our Phil. But, yeah, understood. Right, moving to our last news story. And this is Filmmaker makes a documentary. And the documentary is about ham radio. I'm going to give it to you again, Caryn, first, because you put this one in. Would you like to go first on it?
Sure, Martin. This half-hour film started as a class assignment. Nothing more than that. A class assignment by Grace Walcott. She's at the University of Montana, and she, by now, may have even graduated. This was her final semester. The students formed teams and were told to produce documentaries. Grace has a small portable shortwave radio and amuses herself with it occasionally. But she took that amusement a little bit further and decided, Montana has a robust ham radio community. Let me tell their story. And she put together a team, and basically everybody learned the art of making a film. And Grace learned a little bit more, as she told us on Newsline, that she learned a lot more about amateur radio. How can you not if you're making a film about it? And she was most impressed with Lance Collister, W7GJ. He, in fact, if you see the film, and I encourage people to watch, he's in the opening scenes. He's helping her study because now she would like her license. So it's interesting. She's not even a university student majoring in the sciences. She wants to be a filmmaker. Ham radio has other filmmakers in its ranks, certainly. But it's not like, she was an engineering student and she did this for one of her electives. She definitely wants a career as a filmmaker. But now she has decided, based on what she saw among the people in all the interviews that were done and all the travels she made in order to put this together, that there is amateur radio in her future. So it's quite a wonderful story, because she got more out of it than she bargained for. And I think that's kind of neat. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think if you talk to an amateur, you often get more out of it than you bargained for, because most of us are extremely passionate about our hobby. So they probably treated her very, very well, and helped her through. And I haven't seen this yet, but I will look out for it. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm the same as you, Martin. I haven't watched the video yet, so I can't really comment on the content. But I think from what's just been said, it just reflects on the fact that amateur radio is more than a hobby. It's a community. And I think Grace has probably seen some of that and been welcomed into the community. And maybe that's something we should all be doing, welcoming new people into the community, as we discussed before starting this recording. Yeah, good on her for making the video. I don't know, apart from being released, I guess, on YouTube or somewhere, I don't know if it's actually going to be released as an actual film. I haven't got down to reading that far, but I guess as a documentary film, it might get featured somewhere as a newcomer or something. But we'll see anyway. Okay, it's on the Montana PBS website, and the link for it for the listeners to go and look at it will be in the show notes. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, Ed. But we may be able to find it there. Hopefully so. Dan, you had a few reservations on this, and that's what makes this podcast interesting. We have our own opinions. What's your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a devil's advocate on this, and this is in no way at all a criticism of the video, which is actually very nicely done and shows a lot of different aspects of the hobby, and it's great. But I have sort of two concerns. One is it's not, and of course this is in Montana, which is probably not the most diverse state in the union, but it doesn't really show any of the diversity of ham radio. I mean, it shows somebody operating CW and somebody operating FT8 and somebody operating sideband. So we get a diversity of modes, but we don't get like a diversity of people. The two main characters are two old guys, just like us on here, except for Caryn, of course. But so there's that. Just take that into consideration when you read it, when you watch it. Secondly, it almost makes it look like you need acres of land for antennas and racks of equipment. You know, one guy does Earth, moon bounce. And so he's got these big antennas in his backyard. Well, that's very cool, from a technical point of view. But, you don't need acres and acres of antennas to enjoy ham radio. It does show one guy doing a POTA activation with his little setup, and that's great. But that's only one sequence in the whole 25 minutes. And I think that gets swamped by the other sequences in the movie. So anyway, I guess you can say I'm of mixed opinions on this. One is it does show, the humanity of ham radio, and those operators are, doing some cool stuff from a ham radio point of view. But as a video, you want to point people to show them what ham radio is about. I don't know that that's what you want to do. That's my point of views. However, having said that, I do want to say I do really agree with one thing that was said in the video. So about the 9:45 mark, one of the operators says, CW operators are far more experienced and better at what they do. They're better radio operators. Now, of course, I have to agree with that.
And I wouldn't be surprised if you did, Dan. Oh, dear. But the other thing you mentioned about old guys. So you're off the hook here, Caryn. You mentioned old guys, but I think that all of the podcast team here are young at heart. We are, a fair few of us are getting on in years. I won't grass Frank up being the oldest, but I will. I've just but no, I'm only a year younger than him though. But in fairness, I think we're all young at heart. And Colin refers to, certainly Frank and I, if we get together at Dayton and places like that, as a pair of naughty toddlers. And I know you got a great sense of humour. In fact, the whole team have. So I think amateur radio does keep you young at heart, in fairness.
Well, not only that, if I may use this term on this podcast, I think all of us have a sort of a progressive mindset toward ham radio too, right? So I think that's another thing.
Yeah. We enjoy. Right, well, that concludes the news roundtable of a few news items that hopefully you found interesting. Let me start, and we'll go ladies first, as always, on what have you been up to since the last time I spoke to you, Caryn?
Okay, nothing terribly exciting for me. No projects really, and I have yet to do a POTA outing. On the days that I've been free to load up and go, the weather has not cooperated. So I've been hammering away at ICR, instant character recognition, and working real hard on that to get my speed and my copy and my recognition up. Not an easy hill to climb at all. Dan, I had the pleasure, I think it was a Thanksgiving Day QSO we had. I was able to copy that portion of the menu that you sent. So that was a major triumph for me, is knowing what you had for dinner on Thanksgiving Day. That was.
And I was just going to throw in. I noticed that you are getting better. From the previous contact we had to this contact. So just keep working at it. And you'll get good.
Well, thank you for the encouragement on that, because as long as I can keep it fun and not get hung up on what I'm calling the tyranny of perfection, which is unattainable, I should be fine. There is one quick thing I did want to say. I'm just looking now on my right, and I should mention this. I was given a gift of a J38 key a million years ago when I first got my license, and hooked it up to an old Heathkit. It's a Heathkit electronic keyer that basically I use it as an oscillator, so I have it wired through the back. And I was using it. Well, I finally got around to mounting it on a beautiful block of finished wood and wiring it up. And it's attached right now to the Heathkit, but it is going to be my POTA and my portable operating CW when I go on the road with the 891. So yes, there is that little project I'm really proud of. And that's been my life.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. And I remember 2019 walking around a flea market with Dan, and he spotted a nice key. I hope you still got it, Dan, but what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, I do actually have that key. That you mentioned it. So last week, I got an email from a Chinese manufacturer of ham radio equipment, and they said that they would send me a radio if I would just write a review about it on my blog. And I kind of debated about that, whether to accept it. But in the end, I did decide to accept it. So I got it like 2 days ago. And the radio is the Alunce HS2, which is a little software-defined radio, and it'll transmit from 160 up through 440, and supposedly will receive even up to 2 gigahertz. So this radio is kind of an amusing little radio. It's like really small. It's like 3 or 4 inches high by like 8 inches wide. And I've been having a lot of fun playing with it. I actually figured out how to program it to talk to people over the local 2-meter repeater. And my next steps are going to be to figure out how to get it on HF. And it's really kind of funny. Like the display. I was trying to look at the book here. I can't find any mechanical dimensions, but the display is like 4x4 or even smaller, and it's got a little spectrum, a band scope on it, and all kinds of other stuff on there that I can hardly read even with glasses on. That shows how old I'm getting. But it's just a fun little radio, and one of the things I'm going to criticize actually is the manual. The manual is like really kind of bad. I've already suggested to them that they hire me to rewrite the manual, but I'll give you an example. There was a section in here on how to set up the radio for relay operation. Well, what do you think that means? Well, really, what this section is about is how to program the radio to operate repeaters. So it's not relay station; it's repeater station. That's just one example. There's all kinds of things in here like that. Anyway, it's fun, and that's what I've been doing the last couple of days.
Yeah, sounds fun, Dan. Sounds fun. And I must admit, I do sometimes, if I'm talking to the general public, instead of saying repeater, I sometimes talk about relay stations because they kind of understand relaying information on. But that is a wrong terminology, and a radio written for ham market should have the right terminology. And so, yeah, if you get that contract to rewrite the manual, Dan, you're going to be a busy boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all fun. Ed, what have you been up to?
Well, I'll start by saying Germany is finished. Now, if that wasn't clickbait, I don't know what is. Actually, it's not that serious. It's nothing major. Just that I've now finished surveying all of the HEMA summits in Germany, and just waiting for the last 3 regions to be loaded into the database. So HEMA is Humps Excluding Marilyn's Awards. It's a award scheme for activating summits with a prominence between 100 and 150 meters. So a little bit lower summits than in SOTA, a little bit bigger than some other schemes. But I've been working on that. I've also, for your interest, Martin, I've also finished Cyprus. So both the Turkish and the Greek sides. And that's also waiting to go into the HEMA database. And I also tried to do Liechtenstein. Problem there is there's no summits between 100 and 150 meter prominence. They're all like 300 meter prominence. So while they're in SOTA, they'll never be in HEMA. So yeah, a lot of work with playing around with maps and spreadsheets and measurements and everything else, making sure everything is correct, and then formatting it up so that it can go into the database. And that's taken me a while. I started on that probably 2 years ago, or a year and a half anyway. And the last few months I've been pushing to get it finished. I wanted to get it finished before Christmas, and I have done. So that's one thing off my workbench now, if you like. I also have a new Chinese radio. I think I've mentioned it on the last edition. I bought myself a Xiegu G106 radio, which is a really small radio, HF, or at least 80 meters through 10 meters. And the one thing on that I'm working on at the moment is a ultra lightweight antenna for it. And I did have some end-fed half-wave antennas that I used to run with my FT817. And I've started to look at that, and in fact, I'm using those and converting them all into V dipoles, not inverted V dipoles, and in a fan configuration. So that's I'm always doing something with antennas. And hey, the snow's going to arrive on Friday, so why won't I be designing and testing antennas in the snow as we seem to do every year? Other than that, we've just had Black Week finish. Now, you'll have heard of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. The electronics stores here have all extended Black Friday to be Black Week, in other words, the week before, with various bargains and things. And I actually managed to get myself a Rollei Action Cam 4S Plus, which is one of these like GoPro copies, if you like, €29 with all the fittings, waterproof case, and the thing's controllable via Wi-Fi from a smartphone. So a real bargain, because not only was it Black Week, but this is now an obsolete model, so we're obviously selling them off. But that's now something that I can set up on a little tripod that I've also bought at €17. And another bargain from Black Week, so I can actually start to video some of my SOTA, HEMA and POTA activations to add a little bit more than just having the snapshots that I currently have in my reports. So, took advantage of the, they claim 50% off bargains and things, and generally I'm happy with those two purchases. So, a little bit of new technology into the rucksack to take up the mountains or into the parks with me. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds fun then. Sounds fun. Well, you mentioned snow's coming. I'm going to give a call sign out here. I was chatting to Malcolm, F4VRX. Malcolm, obviously, he lives in France. He's a Scottish gentleman, lives in France, but he also works in Luxembourg and travels. And he was telling me that in parts of France, they've already had the snow, mate. So I don't like being wet and cold, so I'm rather hoping the snow isn't going to come our way too soon.
I'm hoping for a white Christmas, but every time I do, like the 3 days before Christmas, it all melts into slush.
Yeah. Well, I'm not hoping for a white Christmas, Ed. You can have it, mate. I'm not taking it off you. Right. Well, seeing as that what I've been up to, well, we went to the Cats Bazaar. I mentioned it on the podcast last episode. We had a stand there. We were talking to people about the podcast. There may be some new listeners from that, which I really hope there will be. You know, with the newsletter, they signed up to the newsletter and one thing or another. One of the guys at the club knows that I'm interested in all sorts of things and came across and said, "Hey, Martin, I've got a present for you," and gave me a Mega, a wind-up Mega. He said, "That'll replace the one you broke electrocuting Neil," another member of the club members. There is a video on that, but I don't think I'll do it again because it was a bit silly. But my colleague Neil has got extremely high resistance skin and he hangs on to things at 200 volts and doesn't feel it. But there you go. Like you and Dan, I got another Chinese radio. And in fairness, I needed another DMR radio like I need a hole in the head. But this one was a TYT MD380, the UHF single band DMR radio, the old one. Picked it up for £30. Very little money. This thing's almost new. And it's a lovely radio, but it's going to become a donor radio if M17 ever makes it this far, because I really believe you can do a bit of surgery and add a bit of code and you can turn it into an M17 radio. So that's a potential donor for that. And as I say, good little radio. Martin Rothwell and I have also been messing around with sending text messages or SMS messages on DMR to each other. Obviously, the radio has to be on because there's no store and forward, but you can actually send SMS messages if the person's online on the talk group. So that's a bit of fun. I did go and see Andy in Wales and I went down to see Andy Taylor, MW0MWZ, Mr. Pi Star. Went down and had a chat with him about things. Nothing for the podcast yet, but we had a long chat, and he donated a P25 radio for me to prove that the P25 in our system's working properly. We know it is because he's done it, but I was using a Pi-Star box a hotspot to test the P25 via YSF, but I can now do it natively. One other thing, if anybody's interested in and uses the talk group, next Wednesday, the 7th of December, between 0200 in the morning and 0600 UTC, the data center is doing a bit of update work. They're saying that we shouldn't be offline too long, or it may be very little disruption. They're saying it should be very little disruption for what they're doing. So if you do try and connect on Wednesday between 2 and 6 in the morning in the UK, please be aware it might be a bit funny. But apart from that, that's shouldn't be a problem. And the other thing is, I've had a couple of good conversations with new people that have found the podcast talk group purely by accident. You know, they're scanning around DMR, looking for busy channels, and found our channel was on and came across to find out more. And some very interesting people have turned up. So, it's still fairly busy. It's not the busiest talk group in the world, but we do have some interesting conversations. So that's what I've been up to. Yeah, a couple of more. Maybe I'll have an M17 radio soon. I'll certainly have an M25 one operational within the next couple of days. So, and one day I might even get an HF. Hi. So that's what I've been up to. So all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for joining me tonight. I've really enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, thank you, Martin.
Yeah, thanks. So we all enjoy this. I'd like to thank Caryn Murray, KD2GUT.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for keeping it fun.
Well, we try. Mr. Rothwell wanted to try and get me into trouble tonight, so I think we got away with it. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Thanks, everybody. Great evening.
Yeah. All that's left for me to do is say 73 to you guys, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73 all.
73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news here that Ofcom in the UK have agreed to the RSGB's request to extend the 146-147 notice of variation for a further year. It's available on a non-interference basis, and the NoV is subject to a 30-day notice period of change or withdrawal. Full licence holders can apply for the notice of variation via the RSGB's webpage, which we'll post on the ICQ podcast website for you to check out after the show. Now, it is noted that some regions do have some slightly different criteria in returns to additional restrictions, such as lower power limits, etc. So very important that you check out, the region you're in, and make sure you comply if you wish to take advantage of that notice of variation. Sure, many of you may be glued to the TV at the moment as the FIFA World Cup in Qatar enters its knockout stage this weekend. But that doesn't stop. Ham's been involved and, making some special event stations available for you to operate. And it's operating from the various stadiums that have been built for the tournament. And they're available on HF bands as well as the Q0100 satellite for all modes. So we'll check them all out for you. But they all start A71 to A77 and then have the letters FIFA, Foxtrot India, Foxtrot Alpha to listen out to. We'd like to pass on our good wishes and best hopes for fellow amateur radio operator Chrissy Rockwell. And Chrissy's also a listener to the show as well. Call sign Whiskey India 1 November. And he's just published a short book entitled How to Set Up a HF Radio Station. and it consolidates months of research from books and tips from other hams, and with helpful diagrams to get people on the air safely and quickly. So I say he'd definitely love everybody to check out his website where the book is, and I say there's a short code which we'll put on the ICQ podcast webpage for you, I say to check it there. So I say Chrissy Rockwell there writing his book on how to set up a high frequency radio station. Right, well now we're going to head over to our features episode, and our features episode is how to kickstart the hobby in 2023. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, I called this feature Kickstarting Ham Radio 2023. Now, I'm not talking down to people, this is just my observations and suggestions going along the way. I'm not perfect, I probably fail on some of these as well, so don't think I'm picking on you, please. But as I've spent time at the back end of 2022, I've noticed that a large number of hams seem to be a former shell of themselves. They seem to have lost their confidence. They seem to wandering around a little bit in the wilderness. So there's a few ideas here that as a group, and I suggest a lot of these are done as a group, we try and kickstart amateur radio back into life again. Now, COVID is the big frightener, and you have to be true to yourself. If you're still worried about COVID, I understand that. But in fairness, they haven't managed to fix the common cold in over 200 years. They haven't managed to fix the flu. So the likelihood of them fixing COVID is, at best, unlikely. So moving forward, yeah, I think we have to live with it. We have to be safe about it, and maybe have our inoculations, but going forward, COVID is going to be with us. Now, I say that because hamfests and rallies are something that we kind of used to do a lot of. Now, I say used to because the few I've been to at the back end of 2022 have probably been about 50% supported compared with other years pre-COVID. Now, I do want to know that people worry about these things, but unless we attend these rallies, the organisers are not going to put them on. And then in 5 or 6 years' time, we'll be going, well, we used to have rallies, where have they all gone and why have they not happening and all these sort of things. So, you know, we have to attend the rallies for them to stay open. Now, attending a rally, well, to keep the cost down, because fuel costs and everything have gone up, think about doing it as a group trip. So if there's members of your club and you get on with them, as you obviously do, think about doing car sharing. So, you share in the petrol costs, and you different rallies, you go in different cars, but you go as a group. And trust me, it's far more fun going as a group than going on your own sometimes. Now, if it's a long way away and you're travelling a long way to an event, if the rally turns out to be not as exciting as you thought, and sometimes they will be, there is an option. Why not look for other things in the area of interest? So you might say, oh, well, why don't we go and look at this, or why don't we go and look at that? So if you're going to travel a long distance, try and find something else in the area that you can also do, just in case the rally turns into a bit of a washout. Moving on to club things that we can all do. Club projects. Now, a great way of getting yourselves together is to do a number of different club projects. Antennas are the obvious one, and our club certainly built some link dipoles a couple of years ago. We've built balloons, we've done all sorts of bits and pieces, and even radios. But antenna projects are a good starter. And bearing in mind, if you're buying it in bulk, you get a discount on a lot of this stuff. So it's more cost effective to do these things as a club. But it also allows you to get together and sit round and discuss it and understand it and help newbies and people who maybe don't have the equipment to do some of these things. Simple QRP radios are another one for a club project. Great fun. Go out and operate them once they're built, see which one works the best, all those sort of things. Great interaction. And sometimes you might want to build a piece of test equipment that somebody hasn't got, or a useful piece of equipment that we can all put together. Now, I'll talk about the next one is club field operating days. Now, in the summer or in the UK, or when you have nice weather, this has to be, to go out and operate in the field. It's great to sit out in the fresh air and operate rather than being stuck in the shack. Maybe set up a station for others to operate. So in the UK, if we've got a foundation license holder, or in the States, you've got a technician, if they're operating under supervision, set up a station and allow them to operate in other areas or other powers that they would not normally be allowed to use, but under supervision they can. And equally, other parts of the world would have the same sort of thing. Maybe arrange a barbecue or a picnic on that day. So it's not just a rush out, put up an aerial, operate for a couple of hours, rush home. Let's make a day of it. Invite other members of the family to join you. Now, in fairness, I know that the guys in Cyprus do this quite regularly. The wives go along. Some of them are amateurs, I'm not being derogative here. But those that aren't, have a sit down and a chat and join in much the same way. If you've got children there, they'll probably go off and play football, cricket, whatever, and play amongst themselves. And it becomes a nice sort of family day out, and you get to play radio. Now, putting on a special event station is another thing I was thinking of. Those of us who've got children go to school, and school fetes, summer fairs. Now is the time to be thinking about, could we do something in the summer to put on a fete or a special event station at a fete or a fair to promote amateur radio. Now, that's a nice thing to be doing, and we get fun doing it. And the last thing I'm going to mention, because it's probably very relevant at this point in time, holiday time nets. Some of our members and all the members in amateur radio are going to be on their own at holiday time. So arranging a net for them to have a chat with people is probably well worth doing, and it's great fun to arrange a club net, say on Christmas Day or Easter or whenever. Don't forget, they will appreciate it as much as you will appreciate chatting on the radio on those days, and the rest of the family will probably understand. Club visits. Well, in the poorer weather times of the year, and that depends which side of the hemisphere you're on, club visits could be very interesting. See what else is in the area. Find out what's happening. What other hobbies do members of the club actually have that you don't know about? Two of our gentlemen that turned up are members of a rifle club, and we went shooting one afternoon. Great fun. It was shooting in a cave, in caves I didn't even know existed. So, there's lots of things you can do. Not amateur radio, but you're all together and it strengthens the bond of the club. Why not think about club dinners, maybe a club lunch, or breakfast as a group of guys? Just go out and enjoy yourselves. I'm sure the conversation will head towards amateur radio fairly quickly. Moving down, contests. That's something I'm not particularly interested in big time, but there are those that are. So see who's interested in contests within your club. Maybe set them up as a separate group within the club as a contest group. Pick a few easy, short time period contests to start with. You don't want to be operating, say, 24 hours if it's your first contest. I know we do SSB Field Day in the UK as a club, and we often used to do the 2-metre backpackers contest on VHF. But there are other people that might very well be interested in this, and you can get something going that could be certainly work for you. And you could actually do something silly like have club nets and get points for the number of people that you've worked on a club net. So the number of club members you worked on a club net plus a multiplier of the number of times you attended the club net. Just a little silly at the end of the year, but to see how well people attend the club net and get together and have a chat. So that's maybe a nice little one to go on with. Now, there are various award systems out there. I'm not going to mention them all, but the ones to get out and about and do a little bit are SOTA, the Summits on the Air. Quite honestly, you need to be reasonably fit. If you're not fit, SOTA's not for you. But then you could do POTA, Parks on the Air. And there's some nice parks you can go to, set up and operate. You don't have to put up a massive tower or a massive antenna. Enjoy the going out and operating. Maybe do it as 2 or 3 of you. I know Ed will tell me that the other one of HEMA, which is lower peaks, but parks pretty much you can drive to. YOTA, Youth on the Air, this month. We mentioned it already. The Youth on the Air scheme is around. Why not help youth members in your club to be on the air and set up, say, a field day or get together, if you can, to do that, and just making it fun. The other one that I would suggest, if we can do it, or if you can do it, is Jamboree on the Air for the Scouts. Now, certainly when the Scout troop asks our club, we help them out. But it shouldn't just be sit there and scream at the radio and then let them pass their message and that's it. You need to arrange a whole morning of activities. And they love Morse code. They love all the other bits and pieces that go with amateur radio. Silly little things like set up an oscilloscope with a microphone and ask them if they've ever seen their voice. That keeps them quiet for ages. Well, not quiet, but it keeps them entertained for ages. So, little things. Make sure that if you're going to do Jamboree on the Air, you have a whole raft of things you're going to do. And that will be fun. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention, and as I say, not talking down to any of you, because I'm guilty of some of these as much as anybody else, but contact members we haven't seen for a while. Now, some of our members will be housebound. Yeah, and sometimes it's the self-enforced housebound. Yeah, maybe pop round and visit them for a cup of tea or coffee. Have a chat. Or maybe offer to take them to the club. A lot of amateurs, when they get older, worry about driving at night. They don't tell you this. They just don't turn up to club meetings. And then they isolate themselves more and more, and then what happens is you end up losing them as members. And they're just worried about, the travelling at night. So if you pop round and pick them up in the local area, take them to the club, a win-win situation. So what I'm saying is, these are a few ideas from me to kickstart amateur radio or ham radio for 2023. And I am in no way talking down to anybody. I'm guilty of not doing some of these myself, but it was just a suggestion, and I'm sure you may be able to come up with some even better ideas. So hopefully this has been of use.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our feature this episode where we take a look at kickstarting the amateur radio hobby for 2023 and some ideas to get you interested and planning over the next few days and weeks as we approach the new year, going forward from there. So I'm sure, Dad, these are always good bits and pieces of advice that people ask for, but sometimes they forget some of the things, etc. And it's always good to have a clean, fresh start for everything in the new year, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is, Colin. And, let's say they were just ideas. You know, I'm not haranguing anybody for it, and I'm guilty of not doing some of them myself, as I said. But if it gives individuals and clubs an idea to do a few things next year, then I think it's well worth it, because I have noticed that amateur radio events and things like that have dropped a bit by the wayside, and attendance numbers have been down at certain things. So I'm hoping it will help kickstart the hobby.
Perfect. Now, talking about kickstarting bits and pieces of the hobby, the version 2 of the Digital Talk group is up and running and working away beautifully. And if you haven't tried it out, obviously we suggest you give it a go. All the information you need to find out about the digital group is available at digitalgroup.icqpodcast.com, or just go to the normal webpage and you'll see the links there, etc. And version 2.0 is bedded down beautifully, nicely, and is working even better than version 1, I would say.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I confirmed with Brandmeister yesterday, because we still had the links in for the parallel running, although the old servers have long since passed out of history. But we're now 100% no way back to the old system, which is good news, because this one works very, very well. And once again, I believe Brandmeister are extremely happy with us on what we do. And for those people who say, Brandmeister are not particularly helpful to them, you're doing something wrong, mate. They are helpful, very helpful guys. What you will find is if you try and pull the wool over their eyes and only tell them part of what you're doing, then they get very upset when you screw something up. If you're better off laying your cards on the table and saying, guys, this is what I want to achieve, this is how I think I'm going to achieve it, and have an open and honest discussion with them. And you'd be surprised how helpful they can be. So, other people have said to me, why don't you join other networks because Brandmeister is difficult to work with? I would suggest the complete opposite. If you're honest with them, they'll help you. They'll bend over backwards, Colin. So just me on my soapbox a little bit there.
Yeah, and just to finish off that about the digital group as well, you may or may not have seen the announcement, guys, that M17 is now available as well for the Talk group. So say we're adding modes and systems in, etc. as we can, and say that mode is now available as well from the Talk group. Right, well, we're going to do our thank yous this episode. We'd like to thank our colleagues that took part in the News Roundtable. That's Dan, KB6, November Uniform, Caryn, KD2, Golf Uniform Tango, and Ed, DD5, Lima Papa for joining Dad on the News Roundtable. As always, we'd like to thank our monthly subscription donors who do their bit to help us pay our way. And we always invite you to go to icqpodcast.com/donate and set up a donation or a one-off, popper coins into our bucket as a festive season coming around, etc. Guys, we really would appreciate all the support you can possibly give us at this time. So as I say, it's great for people to do that from there. Right, well, that just about wraps up, I think, most of what we need to do, apart from, of course, the very important task of looking after Mrs. B and making her a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea, I should say, and a chocolate biscuit. And obviously, for a big thank you for helping you out at a recent rally. It's only right that we look after her, so we send you off to make that cup of tea.
Well, today, I think we're going to have a cup of tea and a mince pie, because it's nearly Christmas, so we'll find Mrs. B a mince pie instead of a chocolate biscuit. But normally it's chocolate biscuits, and as I say, your mum and I are going to spend a lot more time together today doing odds and ends. So, all being all, that's a good one, Colin. I'll say 73 to everybody, and leave it to you.
Yeah, and I'll say 72, and be very jealous of that mince pie. I'll catch you all again, guys, in a fortnight's time. 73s.